Welcome to the Investment Banking Leaders Podcast, brought to you by the Investment Banking Leaders Club, your exclusive access to the industry's most successful leaders. These experts have closed thousands of deals, generating hundreds of billions of dollars, and they're here to share their strategies, insights, and leadership lessons that can fast-track your career. But the learning doesn't stop here. Join the Investment Banking Leaders Club at ibleadersclub.com for even more exclusive insights, leadership frameworks, and career-accelerating resources and events. Thanks for joining us, and best of luck on your growth journey. So today's guest brings a perspective we don't often get on the Investment Banking Leaders podcast, the client's view from private equity. So I'm super excited to be joined by Marc Jourlait, who's an operating partner at the Riverside Company, where he works closely with portfolio company CEOs on value creation. Before moving into PE, Marc built a deep operating career across technology, hardware, consumer products, and industrial businesses, including leadership roles at the likes of Apple, HP, Bose, Navco, Kodak, and then among others as well. And he's since served as CEO's chairman, board member, and operating partner across multiple private equity-backed companies. So what's going to make this conversation especially valuable for you as our audience is that Marc's seen the investment banking relationship from the other side of the table. He's worked with bankers who've become trusted partners and others who have made life harder for the PE firm and the management team than they should. And in today's episode, we'll explore what private equity leaders really need from bankers, what makes an advisor credible, and how operating partners think about value creation. And last but not least, what leadership looks like inside a PE-backed company. So Marc, welcome to the Investment Banking Leaders Podcast, and thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, no, great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
My pleasure. As I mentioned, or as we discussed, I think, Marc, your journey into private equity wasn't necessarily by design. You started as a product and a hardware person, and then you moved into general management before becoming a CEO, and then you moved to the PE fund side. Can you just walk us through quickly that journey and what ultimately attracted you to PE?
Yeah, absolutely. So it certainly was not by design. I grew up in the early days of the PC revolution and had decided very early on I wanted to work for this small little company called Apple. And I saved up my money and bought myself my first Apple computer. Anyway, lo and behold, I joined Apple right after getting my MBA. And I was a product guy at heart. I just loved products, and product management was the dream job. And I spent a good chunk of time at Apple in Europe, then Apple in Cupertino, the center of the universe, as we all know, and then over at HP, always in product management roles. And what I enjoyed about product management was it was like a mini general manager, a mini CEO of your own product. And that led over a number of years to eventually running either a product line and having P&L responsibility, or running a region, as I did for Bose. I ran Europe. And eventually becoming a CEO, not by design and not by intent, but more just because intellectually I thought it was very stimulating and I loved owning a product line or product category. And then fell into my first PE-owned role, where I was CEO for a PE-owned portco, and loved the business model, loved the mid to longer term time horizon. I'm not focused on the day-to-day, month-to-month, quarterly reporting that Wall Street imposes as its cadence, and alignment of outcomes. Everyone gets paid if everyone hits the same objectives. And after a couple more CEO stints, decided that I was going to go to the dark side and jump over to the PE fund side and joined Riverside about just over 6 years ago as an operating partner for a brand new fund family that was created, the Riverside Value Fund, and have been enjoying that for the last 6 years. It's been a fun ride.
It's amazing. Thanks for your journey. And I can tell that you're passionate about operating and businesses and products, as you say. How has that operator background shaped the way you think about value creation?
I think there's no greater satisfaction in business than turning something around. I find that if you inherit something that's working, you could either keep it going or you screwed up. I'd rather take something that's already screwed up by my predecessors and then go fix it, and then leave it in better shape when you pass it on. And I think that's the model in private equity. You buy something that you have a thesis. A lot of funds are growth thesis and you have to jumpstart or fuel the growth. We tend to, in our value funds, tend to buy things that are operationally challenged, some self-inflicted wounds, some headwinds, or just that haven't been unleashed in terms of their potential. And I love that part of the job, is taking something that's got a hidden potential and allowing it to evolve, and investing in the right areas and picking the right people to run it and placing bets intelligently. And then hopefully when you do exit 3, 4, 5 years later, the company's in much, much better shape. And that means you not only have a better, more valuable company, but you have better careers for the employees and better impacts on our investors and better impacts on the communities that these companies are in. So that's the fun part, is operating to grow something into its full unrealized potential.
Love that. And I can see why it's so motivating, right? Taking it on, as you say, putting your stamp on it and helping turn that around and give back to the company, the people, and the community, as you mentioned too, which is super interesting. For investment bankers listening who know PE firms and clients, but may not fully understand the operating partner role, how would you explain what a partner actually does?
So the operating partner works hand in hand with the deal team. The deal team, their profile, they're ex-investment bankers, so very familiar to your audience here. And they are the ones who are really going to look from a primarily financial lens at the opportunity to make the proper returns for our investors through these acquisitions. And so it's going to be very analytical, very deep financial analysis, and making some hypotheses on what's the investment thesis. What do you have to believe to think that this can give a 2, 3, 4 times return over the course of the hold period? And that's going to be, I'd say, more kind of intellectual versus grounded in operational reality, but that's just because that's all you have at the time until you acquire the company. The operating partner is the partner in crime that then translates that investment thesis into a value creation plan, which is the operational execution of that investment thesis. And that's turning those Excel spreadsheets into not just PowerPoints, but actual projects and programs that you go and deploy across the company during the hold period. And that's that tight collaboration that most funds in North America have that now, have an operating partner model with a deal team model to varying degrees of kind of collaboration and dedication to a specific fund or specific function. But the Riverside model is a very tightly knit team of deal team partners that are the investment professionals and the operating partners that are the operating specialists that are usually former CEOs, and we've done turnarounds. And the transition is up until the close, the deal team has the lead, right? They are the ones going to the investment committee saying, this is the thesis we have. Here's the financing we've been able to secure with an investment banking partner. And the investment committee says, go, you buy it. And on that day, basically, they hand the keys over to the operating partner. And in my case, with Riverside, I become chairman of the board of that company. And therefore, I'm the CEO's boss. And I roll up my sleeves and start working with the management team on that value creation plan. Now, I don't wait until the close because that would be wasting the opportunity pre-close. So usually 30, 60, 90 days before close, we know we have a high probability of closing the deal because we've got the financing in place. We basically are the last player left in terms of the bid, and we have a high certainty of closing. Therefore, I can start working ahead of time on that value creation plan. And that can involve everything from what's the org design? Do we have the right people? So do we have to replace a few heads? And that happens more often than not. Certainly in first time private equity ownership, 70% of the CEOs don't make it, 80% of the CFOs don't make it. Particularly CFOs are a tough role to fill because you need people who have PE experience, investment banking experience, and running a company as the CFO. So it's a rare profile. And then beyond the people, do you have the right processes and tools and IT stack and cybersecurity and demand generation and quality, customer service, and do you just have all the elements you need for a successful investment? So that's what I embark on, is that value creation plan shortly before close, and then start executing that. And to keep obviously my investment partners in the loop, we touch base, if not daily, certainly weekly. We have monthly business reviews, quarterly board meetings. So they're never completely out of touch. But towards the tail end of the hold period, the investment team, so my deal partners, they're going to take the lead again to start engaging with an investment bank to exit. And so I still work on the day-to-day operations, but the weight is much more towards the deal team towards the tail end of the portco hold.
Super clear. Thanks for sharing that. I think it's quite a masterclass there, really, in terms of how the investment bank and the operating partners work together. And I know now, as we unwind more of your knowledge later, why you've got so much, having had that relationship for so many years. And I guess it must be an important distinction between the investment bankers who often become PE investors, but those that actually become CEOs and operating partners. Why are those such different skill sets, and why does that matter from your perspective?
I think a successful PE fund requires both. You need that incredible analytical, almost cold-blooded financial view of an investment. And what do you have to believe to think that this will yield a return? And ultimately, the deal team is there to return to our investors, right? How the company performs is secondary. Their role is for the fund to perform. The operating partner, my role is for the company, the portco, to perform. And you need both of those. And I think that's a very healthy balance that most PE funds in North America have been able to strike that balance, different models. But I find that at Riverside, and particularly the Riverside Value Fund where I am, we've been able to strike that good balance. And it's a different skill set, right? You need to understand investing and what investment banks are going to look at in terms of funding, help us acquire companies. You have to understand investment banking and private equity very deeply to be able to sell our fund to our LPs, who usually are pension funds or high net worth individuals or college endowments. And therefore, they have pretty high standards of in terms of the returns they're expecting and the risk profile they're expecting from whatever they allocate to private equity, part of their portfolio. And that's a very different skill set. Very different skill set than the operating one, where if you haven't run a company of 500,000, 2,000 employees, if you've never done that, there's no Excel spreadsheet that's going to teach you how to do that. And I can't do what my deal team colleagues do because they grew up in the investment banking kind of ranks, and they can't do what I do because I grew up in the operating role, the CEO role, and very complementary skills. And we end up learning how to speak each other's language, but it's a very different skill set. And I love the fact that those two things, when working hand in hand, the outcome is the better investment return for our investors, therefore for us, therefore for the company. In my experience, Europe is not as far along with the operating partner model. And I think that's too bad, because I think they're missing out on the value creation piece of the equation. Almost every fund I can think of here in the US has some form of operating partner model. And clearly they wouldn't be investing in it if they didn't believe in it. Riverside, just to give you an example, there are about 300 people at Riverside around the world. There's 70 operating partners out of the 300. That's how big of an investment the operating partner model is at Riverside. So we truly believe that is a big element of the value creation. And I think Europe has yet to discover that part of the piece of the puzzle. Hopefully they will by listening to your podcast.
We definitely got a lot of listeners in Europe, so hopefully we can spread the message and help others get on board, because it definitely seems like it's an extremely valuable role and what you can bring to obviously the investors and the success. You talked a lot about this dynamic between investment bankers and the PE funds and obviously the operating partners. So when a banker approaches a PE firm, what makes them credible from your perspective?
A few things. I think, first of all, alignment of desired outcomes. Right, we're looking for a partner who wants to make us successful and in our investments vis-a-vis our investors, and therefore they're a partner, they're a collaborator. They're not just a bank trying to provide some kind of service and maximize the outcome for themselves. It needs to be a win-win-win for us as the GP, obviously for LPs, but for the investment banker. And you want to develop those lasting relationships through good times and bad times. So the first thing is somebody who looks at it as not a transaction, but a long-lasting partnership, because we would rather partner again with the same investment banking team over and over again, because they understand the puts and takes and the ebbs and flows of private equity. They're there when things get tight. And they're also there when things work well and they stand to make good money. And we bring them into the next deal. The second element, which I think is often overlooked, is bring us something that's value add. Don't just bring us generic investment banking. Bring us your thoughts, your thesis, your angle on the investments we're making, whether it's an industry angle, we understand this industry really well because of prior transactions, or we've spent time, money, and energy on developing an opinion on this markets that you're participating in, to help us not only acquire, but more importantly, to sell. And I find that the relationships where they come in almost like consultants, industry experts saying, we understand the industry that you're in because you bought this company. And here's the universe of potential buyers when you exit. Here's the universe of potential M&A that you should consider. Here are the business model dynamics that through the investment banking lens may not play well when you exit. So we think you should pivot this way, or you should make this acquisition to change what this company looks like and what it stands for. And that is far more engaging when you have that conversation than here's how many bips above whatever interest rate we're going to charge you, and here's our covenants and et cetera, which obviously is part of the model. But an investment banker that has an opinion on an industry, an opinion on a set of portcos, who knows prior transactions, who knows all of the direct competitors and who owns them and who's likely to want to buy, that's invaluable. That's absolutely invaluable and you develop that relationship over time and they become a partner throughout the hold period, and eventually, hopefully, they get the mandate to help you sell, and they are truly value add versus just transactional.
Makes a lot of sense. So that partnership is key. Value add, that thought, the thesis you mentioned, industry knowledge, expertise, thinking about the future buyers. So it makes a lot of sense. Is specialism now becoming essential from your perspective? It seems like a lot of what you've mentioned there as value adds is down to someone's real knowledge and understanding of the market, the players, the dynamics.
It does help. It does help when you don't come across as a generic investment banker, that you have a team that knows something about the industry you're in, or at least a general category, can speak fluently about the competitors, about the business dynamics, understands the products or the services that you're selling. Yes, if it's just a generic investment bank, we can find, there are dozens of those that we can find. Somebody who truly brings some credibility and some experience, and therefore, as you call it, specialization, yes. I would rather go with a specialist versus a generalist when it comes to investment banking. And luckily in the private equity world, there are enough kind of boutique investment banks, and not just the big names, that do have an opinion on specific industries. And some are very good at certain industries. And if we don't touch that industry, we're probably not going to do business with them. But if they're very good at some of the industries that we play in, then yeah, there's a high likelihood that we'll entertain developing a relationship with them over time. And I think that's, and I've seen both. I've seen the big bulge bracket investment banks participate in transactions, not a ton of depth or expertise in the industry, and therefore the transaction went okay, but it wasn't a home run success. They didn't have an opinion, a strong opinion on the industry, who the universe of buyers were. And I've seen the opposite, where a smaller kind of boutique sized investment bank has spent a lot of time and energy with their partners and their team learning about the industry and bringing forward investment thesis, and here's how we're going to sell this, and here's the story, and here's the angles people are going to try and poke holes at it, and therefore we're going to shore that up, and helping us build the sim, right? So that's, I think, ultimately the proof is in how good is the sim and how bulletproof is it, and the investment bankers should have their fingerprints all over that. And specialization, I think, comes through, right? You can tell they know their stuff, because it'll show up in the sim, and they'll have strong opinions that will be reflected in the sim. And it's not just the PE fund developing the sim, it's us with the investment banker. So yeah, specialization, I'm at least so far, I'm more convinced by that approach than the generic big bulge bracket folks.
I find it really interesting because I have a lot of leaders on the podcast, and it seems, particularly over the last couple of years, that specialism is coming up more and more. And I see these boutiques popping up that maybe would be classed as industrials before, but now it's like building materials or chemicals, and it's really specialized, the work that they're doing. And I think that's the way the industry is changing a little bit. And I wonder whether AI is having an impact there, because at the top, you really want that specialist knowledge to go along with obviously the models that are being built. So really interesting topic. I guess on the flip side, from your perspective, what do bankers often get wrong when they're trying to build those partnerships with PE firms?
I think understanding that PE ownership has its own kind of risk profile, and being there when things get tight, and not just being the puppeteer in the back dangling and manipulating, is like, you need to be our partner. And because we're looking to, in some cases, you might, obviously COVID was quite the curveball, but you're going to have some industry challenges. Tariffs over the last year, geopolitics will affect certain portfolio companies, and you need an investment banking partner who's there with you. And I think that is where you develop that true partnership, is the resilient relationship as opposed to just the transactional one. And being able to say, hey, we need to accommodate this scenario. We were not anticipating this. We need some help. We need some time, and give us a little bit of wiggle room on this, or give us some leeway on this. And if we're good for it, and we want them to partner with us. And I think it's that collaboration, which is not a short-term optimization for them, which usually doesn't help us out. It's that mid to longer term partnership and collaboration that will allow us to weather whatever storm we're going through, and then to come out of it successfully, and then give them the mandate on the sales process, and hopefully bring them in for the next acquisition we make, because they were there for us in the tougher times. And being able to help us navigate those things. Tariffs over the last year have been very choppy waters, and some companies have managed them well, and sometimes with the help of our investment banking partners, who gave us a little bit more flexibility where we needed it. Or having to make opportunistic acquisitions, and you want the investment banking partner to give you that a little bit more freedom to maneuver, and allow you to go make that big strategic acquisition opportunistically. And I think that's what I've noticed over the last 6 years, is those partners, truly investment banking partners that want to help us succeed, because then they'll be successful, and it will be a repeat business versus a one-off transaction. So it's that mindset of, hey, you put yourselves in our shoes. We're PE investors. We need you to think and act like PE investment bankers. And I think that's a different profile than maybe the investment bankers that work with larger publicly traded companies. Very different profile and different cycle. And that's where you can find the right partners, and give them a lot of business, and share in the success.
Really appreciate the insights. And as I said, it's rare to get such a candid insights and feedback from someone in the PE about what they're looking for from their partners, and ultimately the bank. So super useful for our listeners. Thanks again. And on credibility, I know how important credibility is for you, and also for many of the firms. What causes a banker to lose credibility quickly from your perspective?
I think changing things, pulling the rug out from under us, changing things at the last moment, just because they can, because we're stuck with them. I think it's that trusted partner advisor that kind of sets the tone early and says, this is what we think we can do, and delivers on that, if not better, versus, oh, here's what we think we might be able to do, and the last moment pulls a fast one on you. And I think you don't want surprises. Right, we're in the same boat together with the investment banker, and the goal is to make money for everybody involved. And somebody who can deliver on those commitments, those promises, and over deliver on those is where we look for that flexibility. And I've seen that those relationships come in handy where we needed some flexibility, we needed some terms to be agreed early, and they said, yeah, we can do that. Because it's you, we can deliver on that, and they do. And then you have that credibility of that relationship. On the flip side, if somebody kind of surprises you or pulls a fast one on you, that's probably the last time we're going to work with them, because we did that. That's a distraction from our core business, is buying companies and fixing them and then selling them. Our core business is not investment banking, right? That is a service that allows us to do what we do really well, and that needs to be a smooth part of the whole value chain. Is the investment banking has to be part of it versus add more friction to the whole process. We wanted to remove friction and to be a no-brainer, no issues. Yeah, we've got the financing done, right? The investment banker, we checked that box weeks ago. We're good. Now we can worry about, do we have the right CEO? Do we write the right CapEx plan, investments in the first year? Do we have the right cybersecurity? The last thing you want is to be distracted by the funding part. That needs to be secured early on. So that's what we look for, is the credibility and the delivery on that credibility by the partner early on. So it's a non-issue. And it's a great partnership when that works well.
I understand that, right? You're up against the clock. It's a demanding industry. You're in a demanding position. So making sure that you don't have to go back on items that you think have agreed, waste time, distraction, as you mentioned. Yeah. So yeah, it seems really obvious. You really are a value creation expert, and I don't want to waste the opportunity to delve into that a little bit. We've got leaders listening today who are looking at their businesses and maybe trying to work out how they can go on the next 5 to 10 year plan to ensure that they really deliver the right value. So let's start at the beginning. When you evaluate a business, what do you look for beyond the numbers?
I think there's somewhat of a playbook, but I would argue certainly in a value fund, every scenario is different and unique. Therefore, there isn't just cookie cutter standard here, all the playbook items. I think we have a playbook, or more appropriately, I'd say a toolkit. And at Riverside, we call it a Riverside toolkit. And therefore, we have different tools in the toolkit. And I'm going to pull out the right wrench and hammer and screwdriver, not the Phillips, but the flathead one, because this scenario requires something different and bespoke. And I think certain funds have a very prescriptive playbook, and it works well because they stick to their guns. They have a certain industry thesis, and that's all they buy, that's all they sell. In our value fund, we're a lot more opportunistic. We have probably the most eclectic collection of industries, which I think makes it intellectually a lot of fun. But there's never a dull day in the value fund world where we buy cheap and broken, but fixable. And to summarize kind of our strategy, and to varying degrees of broken. And I think every broken scenario requires a different set of tools. And therefore, that's my job as the operating partner, is to customize the value creation plan. Which tools do I need to pull out of the toolkit, in what order and with what urgency? There's some things that are like 3 years out, big capacity enhancement or some big M&A. Okay, that's like year 2. But what's urgent in the short term? And you always start with, do you have the right people running it? Especially if you buy founder-led, family-owned, do you still want the family involved? Or do you want to shift towards professional management that's done the PE thing before? Do you have the right CEO, the right CFO? Do you even have a CIO to help you with cybersecurity, and what's your IT stack? And sometimes you acquire something that still is in the mainframe era, and I'm not exaggerating. We actually just bought a company that still has the 1980s mainframe, punch cards and all. And you need to prioritize. The cybersecurity has to be done very early on, pressure tested, because the cyber criminals are very smart. They know when transactions happen, and that's when you're the most vulnerable, around holidays and around transactions, because that's when nobody's watching. And so those are the tools that I pull out of the toolkit. And then you have to go on a translation of the investment thesis, so that Excel spreadsheet model to simplify, that says revenue has to grow by X over the next 5 years through the following channels with the following products, and margin has to improve by X, our SG&A has to scale by Y, and you have to translate that into a handful, maybe half a dozen maximum, big boulders, if you will, big initiatives that are not the quarter-to-quarter programs. These are the multi-year value creation plans. And work with management on developing those, and then you put project plans and program management around that, and then you execute beyond just delivering the day-to-day business, which obviously is the lifeblood of the company, cash and profitable business. But you then have to kick off these big, bold initiatives, and that's basically what I do. Is I translate that spreadsheet into 5 to 6 big projects, and that's what becomes our monthly business review. What becomes the agenda for our board meetings is let's review those projects.
You make it sound so simple, but I know it's a lot more challenging than it sounds. I guess that's where the expertise and the experience comes in. You've mentioned a couple of times about CEOs, CFOs, a high proportion of them not surviving under PE ownership. So what are the red flags you look for in management teams?
I think having been a CEO, I have a privileged, let's say, vantage point. I know what good looks like. I think I did a decent job myself as being a CEO. I made my fair share of mistakes, but I think I know what good looks like. And my boards, when I was a CEO, my boards gave me good constructive feedback on here's what a good CEO looks like. So I think I've seen good operating CEO models. Same thing with CFOs. As CEO, I always had a right-hand person as my CFO. And so I've seen what really good looks like. I think the deal team weighs in more on the CFO because it's not just an accountant. It's not just, I don't want to use the pejorative term bean counter, but it's not just somebody who's kind of counting the numbers. And in a family-owned business, there's no issue with cash because the family is writing the checks. And all of a sudden, when you want to translate it into the PE world, 13-week cash flow forecasts, leverage, covenants, cash flow are far more important. Those are terms that are completely foreign to your standard family-owned CFO. Usually there's very little leverage. Usually cash is not an issue. CapEx, not an issue. And the add backs and adjusted EBITDA, they don't work on the term EBITDA. So I think that's where you need to pressure test. Does your CFO even speak that language? Does your CFO speak PE? And are they going to show up well in front of the investment banker who's going to want to meet the CFO? Because that's the person who's actually manipulating and using the money that the investment banker loaned us. And they're also going to be refinance when we exit, when we pay interest payments on the debt. The CFO is the frontline person, and that is such a critical role. And we find that most of them don't know what a 13-week rolling cash flow is. They don't understand covenants and leverage. They've never had leverage in their experience. So that role tends not to survive first impact with PE. And I think our investment banking partners would demand us to upgrade talent, but we just do it proactively more often than not. And then the rest of the C-suite depends. More often than not, family-owned businesses, the family member is the chief revenue officer, the chief salesperson, right? The chief technology officer is the founder because it's their product. They're the kind of the person that likes to go tinker with things, and they walk down the hallway and have an idea, and that's what the product roadmap looks like after they walk down the hallway. We look for professional grade CTOs. Chief marketing officers, is the brand consistent? How does it show up? Does it provide proper leads for the salespeople to go chase down? Are they with the times on not only search engine optimization, but AI optimization, which has become the next big thing? So we look at the entire C-suite, including CHRO. Do we actually have somebody who's in charge of human capital versus just doing payroll? I could literally go through every single C-suite role, and we know what excellent looks like and what a great C-suite should look like. And we try and get to that end point within the first 6 to 12 months, if not sooner, because that without the right team, your investment thesis is at risk. So I focus very early on the bench strength and the talent.
Understand the importance of that, and obviously getting it right quickly, as you say early. You haven't got unlimited months to turn things around and deliver the thesis. And that actually gets me thinking about something that you shared with me pre-recording that was really powerful. You shared that there's that 5-year hold period.
Yep.
It's effectively 60 months, so every moment matters. Can you explain the importance of clock speed under PE ownership?
Absolutely. So our investment thesis is usually around 5 years. That's the time horizon by the time we buy it, fix it, grow it, and then sell it. And so 5 years times 12 months is 60 months. So if you just picture a clock, every month is a minute, and you only have 60 minutes to run the play. And if you waste 6 months or 12 months, basically just look at a clock, that hand is moved. And I think that sense of urgency, that clock speed, if you don't do your kickoff within the first 30 days, you've already wasted a minute out of the 60 precious minutes that you're going to have with this company. And you can't wait a year to make a decision. And I think that speed of decision making, rituals and governance that help speed up decision making and risk taking, I think is one of the benefits of PE ownership, is that there's an urgency. It's not a short-term kind of Wall Street driven quarterly earnings urgency. It's a urgency to create value early in the hold period in the first 3 years, and then hopefully year 4 and 5. I wouldn't say you're coasting, but you're firing on all cylinders. There's an urgency to get the big projects going, to make the big decisions, the big M&A bets, to upgrade the C-suite, to change the IT stack, upgrade to a modern ERP, and whatever pivot you want to make in terms of the industry, or the cost savings, or the offshoring, or the in-house sourcing of your supply chain. All of that has to be done very early on in the hold period. So that urgency applies to years 1, 2, and 3. And that means years 1, 2, and 3, you only have so many minutes on the clock to make that happen. And I usually kick off within the first 30 days of owning the company, if not the day of close, within 30 days, and tell them this is the play we're going to go run. This is the objective. This is what the outcome needs to look like. And we tell them up front, this is what EBITDA needs to be. This is what the revenue growth needs to be. This is the margin profile. This is how big we will be when we exit. And if we do, here's how much you stand to make. By the way, we do incentivize them with stock options or the equivalent through a management incentive plan, and tell them if you hit these numbers, it'll be very successful for our investors. It'll be successful for us as the GP, as the private equity fund, but it'll be very successful for you. And here's how much you stand to make. And we are very transparent about that. And I think I shared with you, we're one of the founding members of Ownership Works, which is a broad-based employee program that allows every single employee inside the portco to partake in that value creation. So they stand to make life-enhancing, if not life-changing money when we exit. So we're very transparent with what success looks like and what excellent needs to look like in that first 30-day period. That first minute, we tell them, this is what we need to go achieve together. And I think that's very motivating, and also it doesn't leave any room for interpretation. It's perfect alignment of outcomes and objectives, and that's, I think, the strength of the PE model, is you're aligning everybody to a desired outcome.
Love that. I love that. Everyone understanding the direction, the why, where you're going. And I love the clock speed. I love the analogy, the symbol of it, that you've got 60 minutes almost and it's going around and you've got to make every minute last. And I think that's something I'm definitely going to take away and apply to the business I work within. How can you get that urgency and keep that symbol alive? So
and I would just
really
to extend
that.
on that, since we're talking to a primarily investment banking audience, being attuned to that 60-minute clock and being a partner before the clock starts ticking, because we need the investment bankers to help us go acquire the companies. But then how can the investment banking community help us in those first 20 minutes? First 30 minutes of when we're out in the pitch and playing a game, rugby or soccer, whatever our analogy is, and they need to be there early. They need to be there early to help us with M&A, to help us with potential cash issues, to help us with CapEx investments. The investment banker is less important in year 4, and it becomes important again in year 5 when we're going to exit. But I'd say the partner, we want the investment banker to show up pre-closed and in the first 2 years after close, because that's when we're going to make the big bets. That's when cash and cash flow are a little bit tighter, because we're fixing something that's broken, that isn't generating enough cash, hasn't had leverage, and we're fundamentally placing some big investment bets on that value creation. So that's the clock analogy. I think if that resonates with our investment partners, is we need them early and we need them at the tail end. And the right ones show up early and help us, and then are there again at the end when we need them to sell the company.
Yeah, again, I think you make a great point. It's really important for them to connect and also connect with how you're working and what you're looking at in terms of clock speed, and then how they can show up. And it's back to that partnership piece that we talked a lot about.
Absolutely.
So yeah, thanks for the extra point. You talked about ownership work. So I kind of want to jump to that. I'm super passionate about culture, about recognition, about bringing teams together. And that's one of what we do every day here at Outram. And I know you're passionate about that as well. So how do you actually build or transform culture inside a portfolio company?
I've been very fortunate as a CEO before my PE part of my career, of having very complicated cultural challenges that I stepped into, and I loved it. I loved it because you could have such a lasting effect on the team that you inherit when you come in as a new CEO. And I think, as I've shared with you, there's a quote from, I think it's a Harvard Business School professor, leadership is about having an impact now, but that lasts beyond your presence. And I've always looked at culture as that lasting impact. Is culture needs to be there once the CEO moves on. And because it shouldn't just be, the CEO should be the champion. The CEO's job description is culture. Yes, it's company performance, et cetera, but the CEO sets the tone. The CEO's job is chief culture officer more than anything else, because you're choosing the team, you're setting the tone, you're setting the example, you're leading by example, hopefully, and setting kind of the bar as high as you need to drive the culture in a different direction. What I like about private equity is that part of the value creation thesis has to be cultural change, particularly in a value fund where we're buying companies that were family owned, founder led, operationally challenged, and therefore morale, culture, employee engagement, probably not great. Probably not even being measured, which is another issue. If you don't even measure it, you don't know how good or bad your culture is. And I think that's certainly part of my toolkit is that cultural aspect, is hiring a chief human resource officer, because I don't know how to run the play without somebody who feels like they own the HR function operationally, but also they own the culture project. Even though the CEO should be the champion, should be the spokesperson, somebody needs to run that play, and that's usually the CHRO. What I really enjoy about this Ownership Works program, which is a nonprofit that spun off from KKR that Riverside became a founding member of, is the opportunity to share in the wealth creation with every single employee. Now, you might think, okay, that's just a transaction bonus at the end. The whole point of the program is from the beginning, you're trying to drive an ownership mindset, which is very different from an employee that clocks in and clocks out. 9 to 5, you clock in, clock out, you don't really care. And the analogy I like to use is when you rent an apartment or a house, you don't really take care of it. You're not spending your weekend at Home Depot and buying the stuff to go fix it up, and you're not investing in adding a second car garage, you're not putting solar panels, you're not fixing up the shrubbery in the garden, you're not redoing the kitchen, you just don't do that when you rent. When you own, boy, do you invest. You have a mortgage. Yes, we have a mortgage when we buy a company. We have debt that we put on the company, but then we invest to make it look like a really good home. So when we sell it, it has curb appeal. And that analogy resonates with employees. And therefore, we want them to come in thinking like owners versus thinking like hourly wage workers. And that translates, and we've seen this translate into everything from retention, attrition, absenteeism, and safety in particular. Those four metrics dramatically improved, like safety issues, incidents, lost time to injury, cut by 75%. Employee owners think differently. They look out for themselves, they look out for colleagues, they see danger, they see issues, they go fix them. They don't just say somebody else's problem. They show up to work. They stay at the company. They don't leave. They attract new talent to come and join the company. And therefore, the cost avoidance around having to rehire and retrain because you have high retention. And we've seen metrics improve by 50, 60, 70% very quickly on. And then the other aspect of ownership and ownership mindset is the value creation, is when you think like an owner, you're coming up with new ideas. And we basically incentivize people to say, bring us your new ideas. It could be as simple as saving $2,000 a year to, I know how to save $500,000, whatever it is. I can improve my process. I can improve a cost here. I can delight a customer more there. And if you can get 500 employees, 1,000 employees, whatever the employee population is, all of them thinking like owners, you have a huge lever on value creation. And we've seen that play out. We've now done this at, I think, 8 of our portfolio companies. We've launched Ownership Works, and we've seen that value creation impact, and that changes culture. Employee engagement through the roof. I've never seen scores change so quickly, and employee engagement is value. Somebody will pay us a premium because you have an engaged employee workforce. And it's not just the execs, but it's everybody in the company stands to make money, hopefully life-enhancing money when we exit. And that's what the Ownership Works program allows us to have, is that extra tool and toolkit, which I think is not used enough. There are not enough people doing this, but we're firm believers that this is an incredible tool to have and that we can wield early on in the hold period.
It's so refreshing. And every time I hear you talk about Ownership Works and the great work you're doing for the community, for the companies, it makes me smile. I'm super passionate about this area too. And I can see why it's so powerful. You've listed off a huge list as to how it helps to have that ownership mindset and what it can bring in terms of engagement and developing the people in the business. So keep up the great work.
A lot of people say are skeptical or cynical about it, saying, are you just taking money out of your LP's pockets and your own pockets and throwing it at employees? I have the math to prove that it pays for itself and more. Because we have these hard metrics, both human capital metrics and operating metrics. And yes, it's real money. We're writing big checks to every single employee, but they deserve it. They're the ones who create the value. And why wouldn't we share in that? One of the big tenets of this program is changing the lives of people who, especially in North America, where the wealth gap is truly an issue and there's not much of a social security network that catches you in life. How can you change those outcomes? How can you change people's credit scores and their credit card debt and have them pay off their mortgage and start what's called the 529 plan, which is college savings? As you well know, in North America, colleges are very expensive. And how can you change life for a family, for a community, and for generations? And that's what this program does. This program actually will, when we've seen it, it's changed people's average credit score. It's changed how many people have an emergency fund, how many people have paid off their credit card debt, how many people are participating in a 401k retirement plan. That's the outcome that we want, is employees that aren't worrying about making ends meet by the end of the month, but coming in motivated and engaged because they don't have to worry about their personal financials because we've given them free financial education. So that goes hand in hand with the overall program is investing in our employees' financial well-being, and they will return it to us in value creation in the company. And we've seen that play out time and time again.
It was a tremendous program. I really haven't seen anything else like it. And as I say, it's super refreshing to have this level of importance and engagement and drive put on it. So yeah, any way I can help in that. And do you have something, part of what Outram do in the recognition space is tangible? It's having that tangible reminder of success or where you're heading. Do you have something similar for Ownership Works in your portcos?
Yeah, so we actually, I think you probably know these little deal toy things that we make. You make them.
Yes, of course.
And we love these. I have them prominently displayed here on my desk. But we actually try and make it very tangible for the employees. So when we tell them you're now an owner, we give them a stock certificate. So they actually have something to bring home and say, oh, look, I'm actually a shareholder. We actually produce some, I've just pulled out a few of them right here, these little coins. And we give every single employee an owner coin. So I have them for all my different portcos here. And we basically say, this is a symbol, a reminder that you're an owner. You have shares in this company and you should think like an owner. And it's a simple thing they can carry in their pocket. We make t-shirts and mugs and frisbees and all the other tchotchkes, but it's really to remind them that they should walk in thinking like an owner. So we changed the employee entrance. It actually says owner's entrance. Employee parking says owner's parking. We no longer have town halls, we have shareholder meetings. It's simple things like that, but that starts to get ingrained in the culture that you're coming in thinking like an owner. And this little coin is just something we do now systematically. I'm an owner here, and it's just to remind them, carry this in your pocket and kind of coin challenge your colleague and say, hey, you're an owner, are you carrying your coin today? We do tell them they have to keep the coin for 5 years and cash it in at the end to get the check, although we do tell them they get to keep the coin afterwards. But we like to demonstrate that ownership culture and that employee engagement through tangible reminders. And it's going to be banners, can be posters, it's quarterly or monthly ownership town halls. And we share in a very transparent way, how is the company doing? So they're not just passive employee owners, they're active employee owners. They know if the company's doing well or not and what they can do about it and how they can contribute.
So powerful. These little things, as you mentioned, they may seem small, but they make huge differences, right? And I love having actual tangible things you can get hold of. That coin's a great idea. It can sit in that pocket and really inspire you to think like an owner, as you're saying, to act like an owner, which, as we said, can bring a lot of power. Amazing. And we'll drop the link to Ownership Works into the notes of the podcast as well, so people can pick it up and look more about it.
It's a nonprofit team that helps PE funds and portfolio companies launch these programs. And we've been working hand in hand with them for about 4 years now. And they're just a wonderful team. Great set of resources. They've launched it at over 130, 140 portcos. And it's a wonderful program. Great people that truly believe in the mission. And yeah, we're very proud to have been one of the founding members of it. And we think it's a differentiator for our fund. So we love it as part of our toolkit.
Congrats on it and keep up the good work. Marc, I can't believe it. The episode has flown by. I've had so much fun talking to you, and I want to respect your time. But just one final question before I let you get back to it. To close, what is the biggest mindset shift investment bankers need to make if they want to become truly trusted advisors to private equity firms?
Think of it as a relationship that you're investing in for the long term. And don't just show up when we need you. Show up when we don't know that we need you and that you bring value. So don't show up right before a transaction and say, oh, we can fund this and here are terms. Is be a partner much earlier. Be a partner who brings that specialization that we talked about earlier, that has done some homework, that's going to add value to our thesis, going to help us develop our investment thesis, that's going to help us in those early minutes of the 60-minute clock, both to close the deal, but more importantly, then to do the M&A transactions and do the transformative investments, and then be there at the end. So think of it as you're a partner throughout the entire hold period of that portco, but do it over multiple portcos. So invest in the relationship, specialize so that you can add value to us. And don't look at it as just a one-off transaction. Be there in the good days as well as the tougher days. But if you invest in the relationship and the partnership, we will give you a lot more of our business because we need partners like you that add value. So invest as an investment banker, invest in the relationship for that long-term relationship with us. And if our fund does well, then you will do well because you'll be brought in throughout every single transaction. So that's, I think, the main advice is don't look at it as a transactional relationship, but develop that relationship with the deal team, with the operating partner team, and it will pay dividends.
An incredible way to finish the episode, Marc. Thanks so much. This has been so valuable. I think what really stands out for me is that private equity value creation is not just about buying well or financing well. It's about leadership, operating discipline, culture. We talked a lot about urgency with the clock speed and execution. And I guess for the investment bankers, many of them that are listening, the message is clear. Marc said it many times. If you want to win PE clients, think like a partner. You need to understand that ownership journey and not just that transaction. So, hey, Marc, thanks for giving us such a candid view from the other side of the table and for sharing all the great advice and insights you shared today. It's much appreciated. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. No, thanks for inviting me.
Take care. This episode of the podcast was brought to you by the Investment Banking Leaders Club. And to keep leveling up your career, join the club at ibleadersclub.com for exclusive insights, leadership strategies, and career growth resources straight from the industry's top professionals. I want to say thanks to our key partner, Outram, the global leader in financial deal gifts, awards, and recognition, for their ongoing support of our mission to empower both aspiring and senior investment banking leaders. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks for tuning in. And until next time, best of luck on your growth journey.